title. Yeah, well, I would like to say first about our chronologies very shortly in 5 minutes. We are basing on archaic, classical, Hellenistic, Roman, and Byzantine periods. We know more or less where Bithynia is, but what we exclude in our conference is the part with Paphlagonia. We will not really concentrate on that because we have few papers about the situation with Pontus, with Pontus and Paphlagonia, and one of our paper, which is going to be presented by Owen at the end of the conference, will be about it. So we will exclude this. I would like to say some words about where is Bithynia all about. As all we know is an ancient region and Roman province located on the southeastern edge of Marmara Sea in the northwestern part of present-day Turkey, bordered by Mysia, Paphlagonia, and Phrygia. From the 4th century BC, it was an independent Hellenistic kingdom, and around 74 BC, it became a Roman province, as all we know. During the 7th century AD, it was incorporated into the Byzantine theme of obsequion. It became a border region to the Seljuk Empire in the 13th century and was conquered by the Ottoman Empire in the early 14th century. Several major cities of Bithynia sat on the fertile shores of Propontis or in the forested inland, such as Nicomedia, one of the basic focus of this conference, Nikaia, Chalcedon, Chios, Prosa at Olympium, and Apamea Myrlia. Besides being a coastal region, it was also occupied by mountains as well as forests and has valleys of great fertility. Since the studies of Friedrich Dörner in the 1950s, archaeologically and historically, Bithynia became a special focus in the fields of ancient Anatolian studies. So, as I said, our Bithynian chronologies are sort of limited to mostly Hellenistic and Roman periods. And we have few papers about late Roman and Byzantine period. So far, we have no change in the program, except the title of Dr. Boer's paper has been changed from English to French. So he's going to read out it in French. But if you have, guys, any problem with understanding it, I will, of course, help you through the chat. And otherwise, I have no other technical announcement. Most of our speakers here are here more or less, and Sean is waiting us impatiently. But we still have 3 minutes. Is there any question that you would like to ask me before Sean will start with his opening lecture? Do you have any technical problems or any advices or any suggestions that we should take into account during this conference? Any technical questions? Because one of our participants, Angelica, has trouble now with the microphone, but otherwise everybody seems to be sort of, easily connected to Zoom, more or less. But there's one question. Would you be enabled screen sharing for me? Yes, I could actually do that. Yes, let me just check if I can do it here. Sean, because I think that I need to go first to the participants file and check it out if I can find you. Yeah, there you go. Well, I give you is it good enough for you, Sean? Not right now. Will this be working out for you?
Yes, that should work.
Yeah, you think it's going to be enough for you to work with it?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is the only thing that I can do from here, actually.
Okay, yeah.
Otherwise, you should just send me first your PowerPoint, and then, and I will just again make more problems then. I know myself. I'm technically very bad, actually. So yeah, we still have 1 more minute. Any other question? Until we'll start with Sean. I think that things seems to be more or less good. Now we're 25 people. Please invite your friends to this conference so that we will be more people and we'll have more questions about this whole region, which is going to be a long conference day for all of us. So now I give the microphone to Sean and would like to thank him for accepting our invitation as an opening speaker. I'm sorry also for being very early for British time. But I'm thankful to him that he just arranged everything so professionally and just get into the conference right in the time. Thank you, Sean, for this. And please begin with your conference.
All right. Thank you very much for the introduction and to the conference organizers for setting up this wonderful conference. So let's begin. My paper is about when Romans built a Phrygian rock-cut altar, looking at the Chamdibi necropolis as a cultural nexus in the mountains of Roman Bithynia. So in this talk, I will go over the form and design of this monument near the modern town of Chamdibi. I will look at its topographic context. I will try and provide it a more firm date by looking at parallel cases and doing some stylistic analysis. And then I will spotlight the resemblance of a relief carving on this site to Phrygian step altars. And then I will try and demonstrate that this was a deliberate connection to the Phrygian tradition of building mountaintop step altars. Then after this, I will explore the implications of this finding, the idea of a Phrygian cultural memory preserved on a sacred mountain landscape, and a fusion of an old local practice with contemporary classical elements that was at once steeped in a deep history, but was also legible to the contemporary populations of Roman era Bithynia. And then I will end by asking the question of how common a site like this was and what it means for the broader region that this site exists. So let's get into a general description of the site. It's located here. This site stands near ancient Nicaea, which is now called Iznik, which is on the shores of Iznik Gölü in northwestern Turkey. The tombs themselves are on the western edge of the modern town of Chamdibi, near a recently built Sultanal Yolu, and they are nestled in the base of the mountains on the southern side of a plain just east of Nicaea. And here you can see an image with the monument on the right side and with the mountains in the background, and then the plains east of Nicaea visible on the left side of this image. So this is sort of the setting we're dealing with, and that's the Sultanal Yolu, the water channel on the right side next to the monument that has only recently been put in. So little scholarship on this site exists. It sort of mentions in a few sentences here and there, for example, in an article by Ahmet Ali Altan on funerary monuments in the Nicaea area, or on this Kos Universitesi sort of photograph database, but it hasn't gotten an individual scholastic treatment yet. So that's what I will be doing today. So let's investigate this site and its interesting implications. So first we'll go over the form of the site. It was carved out of a boulder that's sort of jutting up out of the ground, and it has recently seen damage from treasure hunters in just the past few years. I spoke to locals when I was going to this site, and they mentioned that treasure hunters had dynamited it. You can see actually the dynamite drill hole with the wire in the lower left image. So this is what it used to look like on the right, the sort of black and white image, and this is what it looks like now. So fortunately, the dynamite only affected just the corner of the site and none of the actual sort of relief carving. So it didn't really get in the way of any scholastic analysis, thankfully. The site is of at least minor local interest because all of the people I spoke to in Chamdibi knew about it, and there was some trash left from visitors. However, the locals were somewhat surprised that I was there, so I doubt that this is sort of left from tourists. So that is why there's a bit of the monument sort of missing in recent history. Unfortunately, a problem that plagues a lot of archaeology around the world. So looking at the site itself, there would have been sort of two approaches for someone going to the site. There's the altar on the left here, which has a rock cut staircase going up to it, and this is on the west side of this boulder. And there was also this sort of rock ramp up to the top where there are rock cut sarcophagi, and the boulder sort of forms a natural rock ramp. Because you cannot easily clamber up to where the sarcophagi are on top of the monument from the altar side. It's a bit steep, so people would have approached the sarcophagi from the east side, this rock ramp that you can see on the right. So now looking at the altar itself, it is just about 2 meters in height and 1 meter in width. And it is actually oriented precisely east-west. And we'll get back to the significance of that shortly. But it has a very classical design in terms of looking like a classical pediment in the relief sculpture with these rock-cut stairs leading up to it. Now, if we go on top of the boulder, there are these 2 rock-cut sarcophagi. They are just about 2.5 meters in length and 1 and 1.2 meters in width and about 0.75 meters in depth. And they have here are more images of them. They have a chamosorion design. So they would have had this something that looks like this in this image, a rock lid, but that is since gone. And these, just like the altar in between them on the west side, are oriented precisely east-west. Finally, there's this just to the east of this site, which is what I think is an unfinished, likely sarcophagus. You can see that there's clear chisel markings in the image on the right, and it's got a sort of a right angle. So I think that this is a sarcophagus that was started but not finished. It's 1.6 meters in, or 1.43 meters in width and 1.6 meters visible in length. So this is sort of within the size of what a sarcophagus could be. And notably, this unfinished sarcophagus is also oriented east-west, like the rest of the monument. So that's sort of generally what we're dealing with. Let's talk about the date. So the pediment of this altar looks extremely similar to this monument, the Roman roadside monument of Gaius Julius Aquila on the road south of Amastris, and this dates to the mid-1st century AD. And it has in its design an extremely similar looking plinth, dye, and cornice to what we're seeing in this monument of Gaius Julius Aquila. So in terms of establishing a stylistic parallel, this is a pretty good case. There's also a necropolis in Fossalar in ancient Isauria that looks extremely similar with its rock-cut sarcophagi, also chamosorion design, and this is also Roman era. Now, I'm not comfortable assigning this site anything more specific than a general Roman era date. I think that's the most that we can do, since I think stylistic dating is imprecise beyond that for this site. But yes, I do believe it has a Roman era date, as other scholars have suggested in the database, for example. Now, onto the site's resemblance to Phrygian steppe altars. So this on the left is a Phrygian steppe altar from Midas city, just off the southern edge of the region of Bithynia. And according to Tamsu Polat's categorization of Phrygian steppe altars, this is type 3D. It has rock-cut steps going up to it, and it has this relief sculpture or relief carving right here, which is extremely similar to what we see in Chamdibi, with the, again, rock-cut stairs going up to this sort of relief carving. At Fossalar, with those rock-cut sarcophagi, there's also a Phrygian steppe altar that looks like this. This is a different typology. So there's several typologies of Phrygian steppe altar, but it's 3D that we're seeing in Chamdibi. So the monument has a mountain-like setting, which is another reason that it's sort of within the Phrygian steppe altar typology. Not only does it look exactly like a steppe altar type 3D, but it's also in this mountain-like setting with this dramatic boulder jutting out of the ground with the mountain in the background. And we'll get into why it might not be exactly on the top of the mountain later, but it's right at the slope on a ridge of this mountain. Furthermore, it has that east-west alignment, and that's a classic element of Phrygian steppe altars. Is a very noticeable pattern of east-west alignment. And of course, putting it this way, facing towards the lake, would have given anyone visiting these sarcophagi a great view of the sun setting over the lake potentially. But there is that third sarcophagus down to the east behind where we're seeing, which wouldn't have had a view of the lake at all. So it doesn't necessarily have to connect with the lake. I think the east-west alignment is more what what's happening here. So it looks a lot like a Phrygian steppe altar, but let's logic it out to show that this was a deliberate connection to a Phrygian steppe altar. It's not just a coincidence. So this tomb is located near, but not right next to, the road, the ancient Roman road east out of ancient Nicaea. If you wanted your tomb to be visible, as visible as possible, you would have put it right next to the roadside, and it is not. It is not next to the roadside. So why is it where it is, if not by the road in the most visible location? Likely, they wanted a mountain setting for the monument. They might not have chosen the true mountain peak, the very top of the mountain, because that would be far less visible in comparison to where they did choose to put it. Now it sort of looks over the plain, and especially if it was painted, it might have been able to be seen from across the plain. So there seems to be this deliberate choice to put it specifically where it is because of a mountain setting. Furthermore, its specific east-west alignment points to a deliberate choice, because if they wanted the monument to be as visible as possible with a mountain setting, they would have pointed it towards the road, but it is in fact facing west, which makes it less visible still. But it seems that the desire to orient this monument west and to put it in the mountains superseded concerns about visibility. So there's sort of this overarching reason, which I argue is to connect to the Phrygian steppe altar type. So add this all together with the fact that it closely resembles that steppe type, and you get a pretty convincing case that this is a deliberate attempt to connect to the Phrygian steppe altar tradition. So if you get a Roman era necropolis, or collection of 3 rock cut sarcophagi connecting to this Phrygian steppe altar tradition, what are the implications that we can draw from this? Well, this could be an example of a Phrygian cultural memory of a sacred mountain landscape preserved into the Roman era. This sort of Phrygian practice continued under Roman control of the region. It also represents a fusion of this old local practice and classical elements, like this very classical looking pediment. And in this way, it could have both referenced this local existing tradition, but also have been legible to contemporary Roman populations passing through the area. One of the things that historian Nicholas Purcell likes to mention is a translocal recognizability. So this would have had that local recognizability of this Phrygian steppe altar practice, and this translocal recognizability of sort of classical style imagery with this classicizing pediment, and then rock cut sarcophagi, which would have been familiar in the Hellenistic and Roman Asia Minor more broadly. So this is also different from what we see with the altar at Fassalar. Here we see Roman era tombs being built in and around this altar, which likely dates to the Phrygian era. Could have been built during the Roman era. We don't know. There is no stylistic indication one way or the other. So what we do know unlike Fassalar, where we don't know if the Romans built this altar or not, we do know that this altar was built during the Roman era based on its style. So this sort of represents a unique instance, a unique phenomenon from Bithynia, the only one that I am aware of, at least, of this sort of Romans constructing something that looks like this from scratch. Furthermore, if we look at the tomb scatter around Nicaea, here's where Chamdibi is for reference. You have sort of what you might expect. You have a bunch of tombs near the roads going out of Nicaea. All right, that's all within what we might expect. But then you see this scatter in the mountain slope, right on the beginning of the mountain slope to the north, which is somewhat odd, as scholars have pointed out. So is there this sort of lingering notion of the sacred mountain landscape that you can see really well articulated in the Chamdibi necropolis with its mountaintop step altar type? Is there this lingering idea of the sacred mountains that also motivates the position of these tombs by the base of the mountain? Potentially. This is, we're getting into the area of speculation here, but perhaps there's this lingering notion of sacred mountains in the region. So in sum, the Chamdibi rock cut sarcophagi and altar purposefully engage with a mountainous Bithynian landscape as a Roman iteration of a local cultural practice stretching back to the Phrygians. And I argue that this is an example of sort of the broader cultural fusion that is so characteristic of Roman Bithynia. And this is just one small contribution to the larger landscape discourse going on in Bithynia. And thank you for listening, and I am eager to hear your responses and questions.
So thank you very much for this so great presentation. Any question?
Mariana?
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for your talk. It's a very interesting monument, but it looked a bit older to me than Roman times. So I would like to hear, what are your reasons for dating it into the Rome? And when you say Roman, do you mean the imperial or the Republican period? What exactly do you mean?
So in terms of dating, I sort of mean generally, including the Republican era. I don't think we can get more specific. I don't think we can say it's imperial for certain, but I didn't have time to get into this in my talk, but just looking at a bunch of the parallel rock cut monuments in Anatolia, you only start getting things with classical pediments and that look like that in the 1st century BC. So at the very oldest, it might be late Hellenistic, but I doubt it based on sort of the dates of other monuments that look similar.
Another thing, if I'm allowed to ask a second question, these sarcophagi look strange to me. I mean, what is the relationship between the altar and the sarcophagi? I mean, it's not something that's usual. I mean, this connection between a sacred monument and the tombs. At least I don't know about it. Perhaps I'm ignorant.
Yeah, it is very unusual. That's one of the things that drew me to this site, is you don't really see anything else like this as far as I know. And so the connection is, you've got sort of the sarcophagi on top and then the altar down on the side. And there are sort of two distinct approaches to the monument. You come up to the altar or you go up to the sarcophagi. But I think that part of what's going on there might be that it would just be hard to carve a relief altar in anything except the side of this rock. So if you want an altar, you'd have to do it on the side. So you couldn't put it up with the sarcophagi if you wanted to carve them down into the rock. And I also think that the reason it looks so strange to us, especially those used to sort of Roman and Hellenistic, is because they are going for this older Phrygian model. So I think that explains some of the weirdness.
Mm. And why would they go for the Phrygian model?
Well, that's a great question. I think this is a big part of the general debates about sort of persistence of local identity when Romans control new territories. I think that there is a desire to it represents a desire to continue a local tradition, and it might also represent a desire to connect to the sacred mountains, the sort of long-running Anatolian fascination with the sacred mountains. So, if they are engaging with the Phrygian tradition, it must be for that reason.
So it's a Phrygian population still there in the Roman times? Is that what you think?
I don't know if the people would have thought of themselves necessarily as explicitly Phrygian. I think more likely they thought of this as an old local practice. They probably didn't have a specific cultural name, but there was this sort of ongoing tradition that they would have conceived of as local. So I don't think if you asked them, are you Phrygian, they would say yes. I don't think that's what's going on here. But there is this idea of sort of an old local tradition.
But exactly in Roman times, we see a sort of a nationalism, if we can call it that, especially in Asia Minor, where people stress their Lydian provenance or Phrygian. So the goddess is a Lydian mother of gods or Phrygian mother of gods. So they seem to be aware, or they are pretending to be aware.
Yeah, so possibly there is that sort of explicit label then. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you all. And other questions?
Ergun, this is a great question. Unfortunately, no epigraphic finds. There's no writing to speak of. I looked all over it, but nothing remains.
So, very fine. So let's start the first break.